In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can make this kind of a melting text animation. And this will be using the particle system in Blender. First thing I want to do, open up the startup file. Change it from Blender render to Cycles render. And we don't need the cube or the lamp, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those. Now let's turn on the screencast key so you can see which buttons I'm pushing. Change it to make the screencast large so old people can see it like me. Old people like me can see it, rather. Drag this out a little bit so we have more room. And I'm going to, since we're going to be using the particle system and particle systems need bake files, I'm going to go ahead and save this file right now. That way it's already saved, makes it easier later, because if we don't have this file saved, then the bake files will only be in memory and not actually saved to disk. I'm going to name this particle text tutorial, but name it whatever you want. First thing we want to do is add a floor. Go down to Add, Mesh, Plane, and I'm going to scale that up to 100 by 100. 100 on the x-axis, 100 on the y-axis. Now we want to go ahead and give this floor a material. So click on the Materials tab, go to New, change it from Diffuse to Mix Shader, change the factor to 0.1, make the first shader a diffuse, change it to black, and then make the second shader a glossy. Keep the color the same, but change it to 0.01, and that's going to make the ground black but reflective. Also, we need to add some physics properties to the floor. That way the particles land on it like it would the ground. So click on the Physics tab, click on Collision, change the particle dampening all the way up to 1, that way the particles aren't bouncing off the floor. And then make the particle friction, because we want it to have a little bit of friction but still move like fluid. Change it to 0.005. Just a small amount of friction. Now we need to add some text. Press Add Text. Now we want the text to stand straight up, so we need to rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. Press R, X, 90, and then enter. Now I'm going to press 1 on the keyboard to go to front side view. I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and my text is just going to be BLENDER. You can make your text say whatever you want, but keep in mind the number of letters and the size of the letters will change the number of particles. So if you're unfamiliar with this, I would suggest just using the word Blender. Now we need to scale the word Blender so that it's about 10 Blender units on the x-axis. So press S on the keyboard and then just drag it till it's about 10 on the x-axis. It doesn't have to be exact, just close. Now we want to go over here to Set Origin, change it from origin to geometry. That way it puts the origin point in the center, and then drag it on the x-axis to the center, which is right where this little blue line is at. Now I'm going to press 8 on the keyboard to tilt it down just a little bit. Go up here to the Fonts Properties tab, extrude it to 0.1 to add some thickness. Now anytime you're working with text, this is text. But in order to make it do things, to make it emit particles, which we need in this animation, we have to turn it into a mesh. How we turn that into a mesh is by pressing Alt plus C on the keyboard. Alt C. And then choose Mesh from Curve Meta Surf Text. Now it's a mesh. I'm going to go down here and change it to wireframe. That way we can see the geometry of the text. We'll zoom in just a little bit. And as you can see, the geometry is not evenly spread. Around the curves, there was more geometry. But in the streets, there's very little geometry. We need to fix that, otherwise the particles will be unevenly distributed. There will be more particles around the curve than there will be in the streets. So we need to go over to the Modifiers tab, Add Modifier, go to Remesh, and then you have this check mark next to Remove Disconnected Pieces. Uncheck that. And then on the Octree Depth, we want to go up one at a time until the text looks clean. 6 looks pretty good, but you can see a little bit of defect right here on the R and on the N. So go up one more, and the text looks really good. It looks good and clean, and the geometry is evenly distributed. Now click Apply. Now what we want to do is go over here to the Particle System tab, click that, press New, and then change this so that we want all the particles to be emitted or to be created from the very beginning. So keep start at 1, but change the end to 1. That way every one of the particles is created right away. Change the lifetime to 250 since our animation is going to be 250 frames long. Change it from jittered to random. Change it from faces to volume, because we want the text to be made up by the particles. So we want the text to be filled with particles. Now go to Cache, click on Disk Cache, and this is why you needed to save the file initially, because this would be grayed out if you didn't have the file saved. Now go down here, change it from Newtonian to fluid. Make sure the particle size is set to 0.05. I believe that's what it comes set at for all the versions of Blender. But if it's not set to 0.05, go ahead and set it to 0.05. And on this timestamp, we want the particles to not move. We want it to stay in the shape of the text for the first few seconds of the animation. So go ahead and click on the timestamp and just press 0 and then enter, and it changes it to the lowest value it can possibly set. Now make sure you're on frame 1, which we are. Hover over top of timestamp and then press I on the keyboard to insert a keyframe, and it turns yellow to indicate that a keyframe is set at that frame. Now go to frame 125, because the first 125 frames of the animation, we want the particles to not move. We want it to be like bullet time. So frame 125, and then make sure the timestamp still shows 0.0001, and hover over top of it. Insert another keyframe by pressing I on the keyboard. Now go to frame 126. You can have your mouse anywhere in this window, and then just push the right arrow key, and it goes up by 1 frame. Now change this to 0.04. Press enter, and then hover over it. Press I on your keyboard to insert another keyframe. And basically what this is doing, from frame 1 to frame 125, the particles aren't moving. The text stays intact. But as soon as you get to frame 126, the particles start moving and the text starts dissolving. Alright, now we need to create a particle. So go to layer 2, which is right down here. Just click on that and then go to add mesh and icosphere. Now down here, change the subdivisions from 2 to 1. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it'll make it quicker to simulate and actually quicker to render. But mostly it just makes it quicker to simulate. Now we want to go ahead and give this icosphere a material. So click on the materials tab, click new, change it from diffuse to mix shader, change it to 0.1, make the first shader a diffuse. I'm going to make mine blue, but you can make yours whatever color you want. I'm going to set the blue to 0.5 and then turn the green all the way down and the red all the way down. The second shader, I'm going to make that a glossy, keep it that color, and I'm going to change it to 0.01 on the roughness. Now we can go back over here to layer 1 by pressing the top left box right here. Now right click on your text, click on your particle system tab, go down here, choose object, and then click in that box and then choose icosphere. We're telling it to make, this right here is telling it to make the individual particles those icospheres that we just created. Go to display, make sure render selected. Now at this point we need to increase the number of particles, and this particular setup needs 10,000 particles. So change that from 1,000 to 10,000. Now I'm going to go back to frame 1. I'll go ahead and save this file. Now press bake, and it will go through and simulate the animation, and it's creating bake files and putting them on disks, on the disk, a hard disk. And because we used the simplified only one subdivision icosphere, it does this simulation quite quickly, even for slower computers. Now we can click play and we can see, of course the camera up's not moving, but we can see when it gets to frame 125 the particles just kind of fall apart. Alright, I'm going to go back to frame 1. Now let's set up the camera. So go ahead and click on camera in your whatever this is called up here, and then press 0 on your keyboard to look through your camera. And I'm going to press home on the keyboard. It's right around the backspace or delete button. That way it maximizes this, the size of this, to the available size of the viewport, basically. Now we need to set up some keyframes or some motion of the camera. And in this case, I'm going to move the camera back away from the text just a little bit. I'm going to put that at -10. Change the y-axis to 0. I don't know why it always starts out 0.62. Should start out 0, but whatever. And then I'm going to rotate on the z-axis, so it's looking at the camera, and then rotate on the x-axis to look up just a little bit. And what I want to do, I want to pan from right to left in the time 125 frames to the time where the text isn't falling apart. So I'm going to get that lined up the way I want. Go down here, choose location, rotation, and then press this key button right next to it to insert a keyframe. Now go to frame 125 and then change the -10 to, change the 7.48 whatever to -7.48. So just put a minus in front of it, then press enter. And then rotate on the Z-axis to bring it back into frame. Basically just move the camera to the other side of the text. And then insert another keyframe. And as we can see, go back to the beginning, it's basically just panning the camera over. But see how the camera gets kind of close and it doesn't look very good. So what we want to do, somewhere in the middle between frame 1 and 125, which is about frame 63, need to move the camera back just a little bit. So change this to -12. And then I also want to tilt it up just a little bit and then insert another keyframe. Now if we go back and play it, it looks a lot smoother. Alright. Now I'm going to have my camera just kind of go up a little bit and towards the middle from here, from frame 125 to 250. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the end of the animation by clicking that tab or that button, and then I'm going to change the -0.7, basically change the camera's position on the x-axis to 0, and then I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to raise it in elevation probably to 8, and then I'm going to move it back from probably to 15, -15, and then tilt it down just a hair, and then insert another keyframe. Now we'll go back to the beginning and play it through, see what we got so far. Alright, now what we can do, we can run a test render and see what it looks like. And right now I got all the settings on the render set to stock. Now we can already see we have a problem. The text itself is there. We don't want to see that text. We just want to see the blue particles. And the scene is also too dark. So what we want to do, go ahead and stop the render, go back to the 3D view, and then right click on the text, because that's what we're going to be changing. We need to scroll down here and we need to tell it not to render the actual text, just the particles. So deselect the emitter. That way it's only rendering the particles. Now we need to add some light to the scene. Go over here to the World tab, click that, press Use Nodes, change the color from gray to solid white, and keep it set at 1. Now we can render it again and see what it looks like now. Now it's better lit, it's well lit, and we're not seeing the actual text, just the particles. But it's rendering slowly. So go over here to the Render tab, go down here to Sampling, press Square Samples, and change 128 to 5. Now, 5 makes a good rough render when it's on square samples, and 3 makes a good rough preview render also. But if you're going to do a final render, I would probably set this to 10, but for a preview that works just fine. 5 does. Go down here to light paths, uncheck reflective caustics and refractive caustics, and that'll just make it render just a little bit faster. Being that this is a very simple scene, you don't need it anyway. I'm going to change mine to JPEG because I always output in JPEG. The least amount of compression, I'll set an output folder. And then create a folder called output. Select that folder and accept. Now I'm going to go ahead and render it one more time to see how much it's sped up now that I changed it to 5 square samples. It's sped up quite a bit and doesn't look much different. And that's pretty much it. At this point, you can start rendering your scene if you want. Now keep in mind, if you want to make it a larger frame size, go ahead and do so. But otherwise, you're pretty much done. If you have any questions, let me know. And once again, this right here is the end product. If you have any questions, let me know. Leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. Later, people.